Hello, I want to say welcome. Thank you for coming. This is our next installment of our virtual celebration for 2020. We are glad you're here. Matt and Kenny are going to be discussing with you for the next hour about maps. And so we hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. Like Abby said, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, maps, our hiking maps specifically. I'm joined by Kenny Wawsczyk. He's our Michigan Regional Trail Coordinator, and he has a ton of real-world in-the-field experience. So I'll be deferring to him if any questions come up on maybe some like best use things or some different experiences that he may have had that he can share with us that help explain how to do things. Abby is also going to help moderate any questions that come in, as well as Valerie Bader, our Director of Trail Development. So the way this will work, we're using Zoom's webinar feature, and they offer a Q&A button that you should see on your screen. So if you have a question at any time during the presentation, just feel free to drop it in the Q&A, and then one of the NCTA staff people will queue those up, and the group will not see the question until we send an answer back. So that'll kind of help facilitate the way the conversation goes. And as with all of our other videos for the virtual celebration, they are being, or our presentations, they are being recorded on video and put on our YouTube channel, and then all of those videos will be embedded at nctacelebration.org. So you'll be able to find them there later, or permanently on our YouTube channel. So here's a quick little overview of kind of what we'll be talking about. I like to use the word trail user maps, or our hiking maps. So we'll be talking kind of about the history of those at the North Country Trail Association, and then specifically getting into our current map offerings, which we over the years have started to refer to those as our tech series maps, our technical series maps. And then we'll jump into some of the GPS data that we offer, how you can work with that, and then probably everyone's favorite topic is the Avenza Maps app, and I'm more than glad to spend as much time on that as we need to. And then we'll kind of jump from the static mapping world into our dynamic mapping system, and just give a quick overview of how I intended that to be used, and kind of what I think its strong suits are, and maybe weaknesses. And then if we have time and interest, we can talk briefly as to like the different tools that the NCTA staff uses when they're in the field, and how some of those might be useful for volunteers or not, kind of depending on what you're doing. So getting into our trail user maps. We have quite a long history with our program. Originally, the NPS, our National Park Service office, was located in Madison, Wisconsin. And they started working with the mapping department at the University of Wisconsin there around about 1999, and taking a lot of the Park Service's planning information that was paper maps with tape and markers and all kinds of file cabinets full of stuff, and putting that into this computer program we called Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. As NCTA as an organization established itself, they were fairly, quickly able to bring on a GIS person through. I think it was one of the last interns that worked on this project at the University of Wisconsin, and she was focused very heavily on just map production. And when I say just map production, is GIS can be used for a lot of analysis as well. And that's slowly, we've evolved that part of our program as well, using GIS for decision making and planning where it's appropriate. We still do a lot of on the ground research, and that really suits the nature of our work pretty well. And that's kind of the way things sat for a good number of years, maybe a decade or so. GIS as a software is very complicated to use. The user interface is really overwhelming, and it's something that if you don't use it on a regular basis, most people kind of forget how to do the basic tasks.
Everyone just hold on for us. We're just having some technical difficulties. Hopefully Matt will be back right with us. We're in the hands of Zoom right now. So thank you for understanding. And like I said, we'll hopefully get this taken care of right away.
Well, I guess while we're waiting, we did get one question about Avenza that I can hopefully take care of real quick. The question was why the pin moves when you're in the Avenza map. If you take a pin of your location, sometimes it will randomly place you on your map. And the reason is it's simple and you'll do it even if you know the answer, because I do it all the time still. Every time you move around on the map, your little crosshairs on your map also move. So if you drop your pin, that's exactly where the pin's going to go. But if you want the pin in your actual location, I think on an iPad in the bottom lower corner is an arrow. You always want that arrow to be bolded. In most cases, I think it's blue. And then on an Android phone, if you're on Android, it's a little crosshair. And again, you want that crosshair to have a little circle in the middle. So hopefully that answers one question while we wait for Matt.
If anybody else has other questions right now while we're waiting for him to sign back on, feel free to type those into the chat or the Q&A function. We were able to see both of those. There's a question from Doug about what the best terms or words to search for in the map store to find NCTA maps are. And I don't know, Kenny, if you have any suggestions, but I usually suggest that folks go through our website. That seems to be the most efficient way. We've heard a lot of complaints that they can be tough to find if you go directly through Avenza. So going through our website, you can kind of search state by state.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, go to our website. If you search through the Avenza app, it's just going to be a mess. You're never going to find it. There's so much random stuff on there. And I think we'll cover that because it is a big topic, but just go to our trail maps and downloads off our website.
Well, that was fun. Talk amongst yourselves. So, how's my screen looking? Are we seeing?
You're seeing the presenter mode.
You're seeing the presenter mode. Sorry about that. Just one second. How's that? Okay, so hopefully we'll continue without any more of that. I'm not sure where I froze. I noticed at some point no one was moving. But just to quickly recap, GIS as a software program, that's what we use to create our maps. It's rather difficult to use. You know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the main software provider that we use released a product called ArcGIS Online. It's took that same ease of use that you might find in something like Google Maps and brought it into the professional mapping world. And that's been huge for us, both as professional staff, and it's also improved the way our trail users and volunteers are able to look at the information that we have. But in addition to all the kind of trail management and analytical stuff that our program does at the NCTA, and we also do GIS on behalf of our Park Service office, we've continued this whole time to produce trail user hiking maps, and that's a really important part of what we do. So speaking of which, where did those nice printed waterproof maps go that we used to have? That's a common question that we receive. So I want to give a little background on that. The original hiking maps that the NCTA produced in the late 90s and early 2000s were like a 1 to 24,000 scale map. There were a set of usually 4 maps. They were the trail centerline and waypoints drawn over top of just a USGS map. So we just had literally JPEGs of the USGS maps, and we would just overlay the trail on them. And these were great hiking maps, but they were really problematic in that a lot of these USGS maps were created in the 60s and 70s. And if a creek had been dammed up or a road had been changed, there was no way we could make those types of adjustments on the base map. So that's really where the 1 to 100,000 scale overview maps that a lot of you may be familiar with, that's really where those came from. They were our next iteration of map, and at that time we were limited on the scale of map that we could produce. So we settled on 1 to 100,000 because that's all the data that was out there for us. We couldn't get contour data that was of any more detail than 1 to 100,000 for most of the trail. So that's really where those came from. Kind of an interesting turn of events that brought us into that product. And they did well enough, but they did have their problems. And I've found no better statement than Bill Bryson's Walk in the Woods to describe some of the problems with the 1 to 100,000 scale map. So this is from, if you haven't read A Walk in the Woods, this is what he had to say about the AT's 1 to 100,000 scale maps. So Appalachian Trail maps are so monumentally useless that I had long since given up using them. They vary somewhat, but most are on an abysmal scale of 1 to 100,000, which ludicrously compresses every mile of rear world into a mere inch of map. Imagine a square mile of physical landscape and all that it might contain: logging roads, streams, a mountaintop or two, perhaps a fire tower, a knob or grassy bald, the wandering AT, and maybe a pair of important side trails. And imagine trying to convey all that information on an area the size of the nail on your little finger. That's an AT map. So that's kind of what we were dealing with. And by all means, they weren't all bad. They worked plenty fine until you really needed a good map. If you were lost or something, then they were a problem. But overall, they let you see where you're going and where you've been, and what towns were nearby and things like that. Another problem that kind of crept up with these, though, and this happened once we were able to put our trail information on the online map, was that the level of detail that our data was being built upon was kind of based on the scale of these maps. And I kind of always go back to some comments that I heard a lot at that time from our trail volunteers. And they might say something like, "We've completed a few reroutes in our section, but what you have shown on the map is good enough. You don't need to change it or update it." And once we were able to zoom into a really precise scale on the online map, it became apparent that this was kind of a trail-wide problem, that our data was really being reduced in its accuracy to that 1 to 100,000 scale. So we really needed to do something to fix that. And at the same time, this is when Facebook and other social media platforms were taking off, and folks would just be scanning our maps and posting them and sharing them, and that was great, and we really liked that. It was just kind of weird because they were also a copyrighted product that we sold, so we had to do some rethinking with what was actually the mission of the association and what were we trying to accomplish. But just to kind of let you all know, we do plan on bringing something like these back. They will, we've identified a certain convenience of having that large region shown on less pages, basically. So we want to kind of bring what we're calling like our regional overview maps, and those will integrate right with our more detailed technical series maps that we'll talk about in a second. And I'm also trying to, I work a lot with our chapters making chapter brochure maps. So I kind of want these maps to fulfill the same purpose that our chapter brochure maps often do, which is a tool that lets you understand the regional landscape, the nearby towns and how the trail fits in to both like the road system and the nearby towns, and different sections that are continuous sections of trail that might be cool to hike, and loop trails and things like that. So those will be coming at some point in the future. But again, these maps, these 1 to 100,000 scale maps did overall present some issues for us. So enter, what we've called the tech series maps, and these are essentially built on a 1 inch to a ½ mile scale, basically 3 times the detail. They're built on a fully customized base map, and they are free to download and print at home or share online. So these maps were kind of a lot of borrowed ideas here. Well, is maybe a nice way to say it, but they're the combination of some of the best ideas and newest technologies in mapping, and particular long distance trail mapping that was out at the time. So just with, federal agencies putting a lot of data in a digital format online, the USGS began to make really great data available, both with like roads and boundaries, but also raw data for elevation and things like that. And we were able to use some of the more advanced features of our software to make more detailed elevation contour lines and things like that. So this kind of opened it up for us. We could really make any map that we wanted at this point. And I settled on that 1 to ½ mile scale for a couple of reasons. I did a lot of field research, and I found that at 1 to 40,000 scale, you begin to lose the ability to really make on the ground decisions when you got in a confusing area. Our landscape in general is not that dramatic. It's not like out west where a 1 inch to a mile map and you can just easily tell where you're at just by looking around you at the landscape. So this was, what I thought was appropriate for navigating in our landscape. And another nice kind of element that happened was a process in our mapping software that allowed a lot of maps to be created very quickly. And this idea was first explored by our National Park Service office and the folks at our GIS office in Madison. And they came up with basically what they called a series of management maps for the entire trail. And these were using a process in our software called data-driven pages, where we basically define like the page outline, and then the software will produce a map for each of those page outlines that we define. So that's kind of what you're seeing in the purplish pink squares are the actual 8.5 by 11 pages. And then the software will kind of zoom in and automatically create a map for each of those pages. And the reason I bring that up is you can't underestimate how important that is when you have 4,600 miles of trail to map. Computers are clunky and problematic and still slow, and that really adds a level of efficiency to our map making process that's really for the first time allowed us to complete maps for essentially the entire North Country Trail, except for those areas managed by our affiliates. So this got us thinking, when the Park Service released these maps out, maybe this would be the new platform for our new hiking maps. So most everybody knows Luke Jordan, and when he thru hiked the NCT in 2013, he actually hiked with a prototype of these maps. They were actually a 1 inch to a mile version, and he was pretty happy with them. So that was kind of like the proof of concept. And the other nice thing we wanted to do here was just make something that could be printed at home. We had tried repeatedly to get our other maps into retail settings, and it's quite an undertaking. And we just weren't making the progress that we felt we needed to make. The trail was really gaining in popularity at the time, and there just wasn't the retail infrastructure in place to put these maps in people's hands. We were getting a lot of calls on Thursday and Friday afternoons of folks like in Michigan that would be heading, from southern Michigan to up north, as we refer to it, and wondering where they could, grab these maps off the highway, and there just wasn't a place. So that was a big deal for us to make these a printable at-home map. So since we do have you all here, how many do we have? 60. We have the ability with this Zoom webinar software to take a poll. So I'm just curious, how many people actually print these maps at home? So Abby's going to drop that poll up there. You can just respond. And we did spend a lot of time too looking at, adjusting our color schemes and stuff so they wouldn't be as taxing on ink use and things like that. And at the same time, there's some symbols built in that are, work with people who have like red-green color blindness or color confusion, I think they call it nowadays. So I used some research that came out of Penn State as to what type of symbols would best work for all folks.
So we have the results in.
Yeah.
And so 52 people voted. So we have 30 that said they do print and 22 that said they do not print.
Cool. Well, good to know. So the other borrowed idea that that kind of happened, this was all happening at the same time. Some Pacific Crest Trail thru hikers, in an effort to solve a limitation that a lot of GPS receivers have in the size of the file that you can load, came up with what they called the half-mile project. And this basically divided the Pacific Crest Trail into half-mile intervals, the data into half-mile intervals, and it allowed the entire PCT to be loaded onto just like a standard GPS receiver. And so basically you have a series of half-mile points. They're numbered, start to end. And that also creates a nice little link between a printed map that also show those indexes basically. So it pretty quickly with a GPS unit and a printed map with these shared numbers, you can overcome needing serious map and compass skills and really figure out where you're at on the trail. And that was kind of our original expectation. This was all happening before, just right before smartphones really took off. So, and I still think this is a really great way to use these maps, but you essentially, you can go onto our website and download the half-mile points and then use them in any sort of, pretty much any GPS receiver. Although I will make one comment before we end this section. And then you can, locate on your GPS receiver, which generally, like, the Garmin GPS receiver you're seeing on your screen is a much more rugged device than an iPhone. It works in a much broader temperature range, and the batteries are replaceable, which is huge. But at the same time, there's a lot of great GPS apps as well. Like Gaia GPS is getting extremely popular, and they're doing a lot with the long distance backpacking community. So I'd encourage folks to check that out as well. Again, that's something you can load. You can actually load the data onto as a GPX file format. You're not loading the actual PDF maps onto your GPS receiver or these apps. You're just loading the data, and then you would print the maps and match them up.
Matt, we did have a question in the Q&A that I think is relevant to that slide. Luke asked if you were aware of any phone apps that take a fairly reliable GPS track.
Yeah, for sure. I think I might touch a little bit on that, but it'll be worth repeating if I do. So it's a lot about the quality of the hardware. So I think that iPhones in general have a separate GPS receiver that's often augmented by cell towers. So I forget what they call it, like enhanced GPS or something like that. So iPhones generally are pretty good. And then I really like that Gaia GPS app. There was another one we were using by a company called Graphica called GPS Kit. The support on that is kind of waned, and it's unfortunate because I think it was a premium app. I think we paid like $30 or something for it, which is, you know, a fair amount of money for an app. Since Gaia GPS has gained in popularity, I haven't checked really back in with Graphica. So Gaia GPS would be my recommendation for just straight GPS work on a phone. Did Luke Jordan ask that question? Luke, Gaia GPS is also interviewing, they're doing like all kinds of podcasts with the guy Trauma that just, you know, that through hike the PCT in the winter, and Skirk has been on there and all those folks. So that'd probably be right up your alley, Luke, to check Gaia GPS out. But that is, yeah, a nice lead in. So let's do another poll and just, you know, satisfying my curiosity here. Do folks use GPS data? Do you use the GPS data either on a phone or on a GPS receiver? And the caveat that I wanted to mention is, you know, for years and years and years, it was just a few of these Garmin mapping GPSs were like 90% of what people had, and then, you know, the other 10% would have a DeLorme or something like that. And now the InReach GPS receiver has really gotten popular with folks, especially longer distance hikers. And that tool's not set up to function the same way as like a Garmin mapping GPS units, like the one I showed earlier. That device, I don't have one, but I think it's limited to like 500 waypoints or something like that, maybe even smaller. But I get requests every so often from folks asking me to kind of split, you know, like how many ever, like we have, you know, 1,058 miles in Michigan. So kind of like, can I split that up into like whatever the limitations of their receiver are for the individual files? So I would just caution against that, you know, kind of look at your instruction manual. I don't think the InReach is intended to be like on the trail navigation tool. I think it's primarily intended to be like a, you know, something that you keep your folks at home up to date on what's going on.
And so this poll for the half-mile GPS data, we have 58% said yes and 44% said no.
Oh, wow, cool. That's more than I would have thought. So that's great to hear. And I would encourage everyone to, a cool thing, like if you have a GPS app on your phone, you can just download those waypoints and have them on there, and you never, like, I don't know if I'm unusual in that I sometimes just find myself, you know, having a couple extra hours and we go for a hike and, you know, boom, you've got that information there if you want to pull it out and check it out. So definitely a good way to interact with the maps. And if I was doing a longer distance hike, I would absolutely be carrying a Garmin with lithium-ion batteries and printed maps. So as much as we love these half-mile points, there's a horrible aspect to them, and that is every time we change the trail in a given state, any change, it shifts the location of all these points. And I just wish there was a better way around this, and we've racked our brains. Because it's really unfortunate, because I hate for folks to, you know, get you know, a set of maps downloaded and then we throw a change out and it shifts everything. And especially if, you know, we've had folks like ask for, you know, volunteers to pick them up at, you know, mile marker 435.5, and it's like, geez, I hope that they're working off that same set of data, you know, from the same release. Everything that we put out we will never like have like our PDF maps that are available for our website will never be different than the GPS data or the online map or anything like that. It all gets updated at the same time. But yeah, we can't control, you know, what folks have already downloaded. So just a big reminder, make sure that you're always checking the website to make sure you're on the most recent version of everything.
Before you move forward with that one, we had a question that's relevant right now, asking if you can limit the number of changes per year, make those changes quarterly, once a year, twice a year.
Yeah, we've played around with the idea of can we possibly get by doing just an annual update, so you'd get everything at the beginning of the year and everyone would know. If we can't do that, it's like, geez, we owe some sort of schedule to everyone so they know that things won't change until, you know, on the quarter or you know, semi-annually or something like that. That's our like aspiration, but we have things that happen on this trail just because of the nature of it that it kind of blows that out of the water, unfortunately. But we're working on that, and any opportunity, like, I think that's something that's constantly on my mind, and I'm constantly talking to the regional trail coordinators about ideas for that. But the trail is still very much a work in progress in a lot of places, and things can happen that can you know, cause us to have to release an update outside of a schedule that we might come up with. And that's, yeah, that I didn't touch on that really, but that was kind of another driving factor of why we moved away from a printed product, because holding inventory was so difficult when changes did come up unannounced, and it would invalidate like all the inventory we had on hand. But yeah, like, you know, I've been describing this kind of perfect storm of neat little technological things that were happening as we were developing these maps. And this geospatial PDF was another big one, and it was, everything I've said so far was like the scope of our project, and geospatial PDFs just happened as like an accident. They were just like a nice little icing on the cake. So this, you know, presented an opportunity to deliver the map itself in a format that allowed users to just track their location right on the PDF that we were producing. So this company Avenza that had basically just provided some software that linked like graphic designers into the mapping worlds. They came out with this app called, I think it was PDF Maps at the time, it's called Avenza Maps now. But that allowed folks to bring these files onto their device and then, you know, go right on the trail and track their location. And I think Avenza evolved in a way that they didn't intend either. And there's I think this is what you guys were talking about when I froze up earlier. It's not always the most straightforward app for long distance hiking. I don't think that's what they intended it to be. You know, the National Park Service puts their visitor maps, you know, like the black banded map that you get when you go to the visitor center of the park that you're visiting. These are all on Avenza as geospatial PDFs, and I think that works real well. It's like one map and it's straightforward. We're a little bit beyond the scope of what they intended. So we've come up with some shortcuts that I hope make things easier from time to time. So one of those is a direct link to the Avenza maps on the Avenza Maps store. So their search function doesn't give us the results we're looking for generally. If we just open the Avenza app and search for maps, you're not necessarily going to find the North Country Trail maps first. And if you do, they might not be the ones we made, which can be problematic because a lot of folks have put North Country Trail maps up there years and years and years ago, and they haven't bothered, you know, to update them or anything like that. And some of them are even for sale, like they have a fee associated with them. So I recommend that folks always just visit our website. And I have the URL down there at the bottom, but it's pretty easy to find from the homepage. And then we have this mobile maps section, and you can, each of these links will take you directly to the Avenza map store. And once we decided that we were going to move forward with geospatial PDFs, Avenza kind of reworked their model and made the Avenza app be subscription-based. It used to just be free and you could load maps on it. And if that were the case, we would just, you know, have you download the maps from our website and load them on the device, you know, however you would do that. But the subscription barrier kind of worked against our concept of making maps freely available. So basically the other kind of shortcut we've done is just made these maps available at no cost. But you still have to go through the Avenza map store to get them. That way you can have a large number of maps on your app without having to subscribe to their app, which I don't know. I'm not sure if that's, I mean, they're totally cool with it. We talk to the developers and stuff, but at the same time, you know, they are putting a lot of effort into making this app and we're using it. So if you did want to subscribe, I don't think that would be a bad idea. So I wanted to take this time to take any particular Avenza questions that folks have. So I'll maybe just run through what I have here on the screen, my kind of top troubleshooting tips. And then if you have any other like Avenza type questions that you want to send in, now would be a fine time to do that. You're always welcome to contact me, or you know, if you're a volunteer doing, you know, volunteer trail related stuff, you can contact Kenny with those types of questions as well. I'm glad to take all the trail user and hiker questions. So like I said, kind of number one, we tried to make a couple shortcuts to make things work for our specific needs. Direct links to the maps from our website and setting the price of the maps at no cost. So that keeps our trail users from having to subscribe to the Avenza app if they don't want to. The other thing is, I do not recommend that you use the Avenza app as like a hiking history or hiking experience app. And what we mean by that is like recording all of your hikes and the miles you're logging and things like that. You can do that, but it's not the intention of the Avenza app. It's a very, what I call, it's almost like a professional mapping tool. It's just meant for, the GPS stuff is focused more on like someone who would be producing a map. I don't think it's as good of a tool as something like I personally use Strava. I just talked to someone yesterday that uses Map My Hike, and then Gaia GPS would also be a good option. And you can use these apps at the same time on your device. So my process would be, if I was going for like a trail run on a section of trail that I wasn't familiar with, I would definitely load the Avenza app with the map for that section. But I would also launch Strava in the background, and Strava would record my run. It would record, you know, different statistics like the speed and things like that and the distance for me. And then because like Strava and Map My Hike, that data is stored in the cloud, then I would have that for future reference if I want to like track my progress or something like that. And then, you know, when we release new maps, the app is supposed to let you know new maps have been released. Would you like to update? Yes or no? A number of other things like that. If that just doesn't work perfectly for you, my recommendation is just delete the maps from your phone and re-download them. That for me has solved 100% of the problems we've ever had trying to troubleshoot the app. So that's another reason not to rely on that as a tool to track your hiking history, because it is a little volatile, and the best solution I found is just to, you know, wipe your map set out and re-download them for free. So have we had any other questions or anything that come up on Avenza?
Yeah, there's a couple specific to Avenza. You know, someone said it's hard to tell what map is the one you're on and hard to move from one map to another. And somebody asked a sort of related question to that is, could you add the neighboring title name to the data-driven pages so we don't need to guess the next title we need to navigate to, or maybe they're not seeing it?
Yeah, that's a good point. We should do that. We should say continues on map, you know, 107 or something like that. I'll look into that. I was just alerted by a hiker, and I haven't gotten back to him yet. I checked this out on the app and it seems to work. Some of our maps will now in Avenza, they will automatically take you to the next page when you go over there. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, I tested it. Like I think our Western UP maps and the North Dakota maps do function that way. Some of the other ones like Northern, Lower Michigan do not. So I will check with the Avenza developers and we will have all of our maps functioning that way as soon as we can. that cover that? Was there another question with that?
No, there is one other question. Do you have any tricks to running both Avenza and Gaia at the same time?
No, I haven't had any issues with, I haven't used Gaia extensively. I have used them together a fair bit. And then I used the GPS kit, which I think would pull the same like subsystem stuff as Gaia. I used that a lot with Avenza and did not have any issues other than, I don't know, I gave Kenny a life-changing tip one time of just like, I think it was Kenny, just, like, don't let your screen go to sleep. If you're just, if you're just going out for a couple hours, you can turn your screen to never shut off. That helps a lot. But no, in my experience on the iPhone platform, they've worked really well together. Good.
Yep.
And
Matt, can you eloquently touch on why some of our affiliate trails like the SHT and Buckeye Trail are not on our maps?
Yeah, for sure. The Spear Hiking Trail, Buckeye Trail, and Finger Lakes Trail all existed before the North Country Trail was authorized by Congress. So each of those groups have their own association, and the revenue that's created by selling their maps is really significant for them. So that's that's where we are with that. All three of them have really good mapping products, and I don't think I guess I haven't done any like through hiking or really serious long distance hiking. So I imagine in some ways it's probably a little bit of a mental challenge when you've spent weeks and weeks with a certain map, then to jump onto another platform and jump back. But we're all working together and talking to each other. And I think if you look at the new Superior Hiking Trail Association maps, they at least look like our maps. And Buckeyes are we talk to those guys all the time. And I think there's some commonality there. So yeah, it's a little bit, I wish we had just one package we could drop for the entire North Country Trail, but that's not the reality. That's not the nature of the North Country Trail. It's unique in that way, I think, sort of. Yeah, I think you're well covered, and I think there's the information out there that everyone needs to use the North Country Trail in its entirety.
Then we just had another one about kind of relating Google Maps, the trailheads, and all that information that you find on their base layer. You touched on it a little bit, but can you go over how our maps can be redefined and don't trust Google Maps?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, I don't know for sure, but I think a lot of stuff pulls from like the USGS, and like we've had just tons of roads that are just don't exist, or both that are shown roads that do not exist, or roads obviously that are not shown that need to be shown. We've had a couple streams that have been dammed up or for whatever reason are no longer flowing, stuff like that. The North Country Trail is maybe not in the most, in some places we're pretty rural, kind of just backcountry. It doesn't always make it into bigger updates. Yeah, so that's that. I mean, it's better and better though. I don't know. But yeah, you can't, always keep in mind there's a person behind the information on the map, and they're only able to put in their, what they have. And a lot of times what I'm trying to say is one mistake gets put out into, say, the USGS's data that they make available nationwide, and then that quickly finds its way into all other maps. So we have the advantage of not being beholden to those larger organizations, and that now we have our own custom base map, and we can go in and make those changes. And oftentimes we've submitted changes to Google, and at least one time they've gone through. But yeah, you'll notice all these companies are pulling our, like Google and Onyx Maps, and a bunch of different companies are constantly pulling our trail line, and pretty regularly too. I'll look and be like, oh wow, they actually got that change in there that just came out a couple weeks ago. So I think it's getting better and better. Our data itself is offered in a a developer kind of back-end format. We have a live link directly to our data that anyone can take advantage of for those types of things, and many do. Many of our like agency partners, like state DNRs and some federal partners use that data, a live link to our data in their systems, and that's really helpful to keep them up to date on everything because they get real-time updates.
Matt, I just wanted to point out, I just dropped a link to our, trail, our map and our data page in the chat. And somebody had a question about, how they could tell when the most recent updates were. So I answered that, but I don't think the answer went out to everyone. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we have both a change log on that page that should tell you when changes were made. And then each map set has the update date next to it, so you should easily be able to see when.
Yeah, we just tried to keep it simple. It's just by date. The PDF maps have a date on them, and that is kind of the most recent update, and you can reference what those updates are in the change log, which is like a downloadable spreadsheet. Yeah, no version numbers or anything like that you have to worry about. Just look at the date. All right. So the next topic I wanted to cover was our online map. So the NCTA maintains a very popular online mapping system, kind of off the charts popular. So we know what you folks are doing in your spare time because this thing gets used crazily. So this is built in kind of the industry standard software put out by a company called ESRI. This is ArcGIS Online. It's a great tool for visualizing the trail centerline and waypoints. It can be useful as a hiking tool, but you have to, at this point in time, you have to have a data connection to use it. So it's not downloadable like our maps are. There was a guy that hiked the Lower Peninsula of Michigan with this. I wouldn't recommend that, but he did, and he was able to get a data connection when he needed it. So I kind of look at the online map as a tool that excels for planning and exploration from home and on the way to the trail. And kind of what I mean by that is for every like parking area on the trail, we've built in the code to launch Google Map driving directions from where you are located. So if you launch, I use this all the time. So I bring up the online map on my phone, find where I want to go, and I hit what you're seeing, in front of you here. I click on a parking area, and then it has this Google Maps driving directions, and unfortunately it says more info. There was no option to customize that. But essentially what that more info is the link to Google Maps. And if you have Google Maps installed on your phone, it will actually open the Google Maps app, and it will set that parking spot as your destination. And if you have like a cell phone that knows where you're at, it will set where you're at as your your starting point, and then you can generate directions to that. I always recommend looking ahead to make sure that it's really taking you to that location. I think it's like previewing the route or something like that is the option in Google Maps. But yeah, I think that's extremely useful, and I do recognize very much that one of the shortcomings of our PDF maps is that they're very narrowly focused onto the trail itself, and it's hard to see the larger area around them. So until we get those regional overview maps, available trail-wide, I think this is a great, great way to kind of explore the larger region and figure out, like, where's the nearest section of trail or something like that. Like I said, this is an extremely popular tool for us, and it's pretty simple right now. It really just shows you the trail, the center line, and the half-mile points. You can click on any point or segment of line, and it will show you all the information that we have about that section of trail. So that's kind of useful. Things like, is it open to dispersed camping? Are horses allowed? Who's the land manager? Stuff like that. But that has its limits and its usefulness. And we are working on an updated user interface that will allow for a more custom distance measurement. So right now, if you want to know the distance, you've got to count the half-mile points and do the math. The new user interface that we're working with will allow you to just select a bunch of segments of line, and then it will summarize their distance for you. So pretty nice feature. And it'll also have some filter buttons in it, or query buttons for like more database language. So it'll allow you to like show with all that information we collect about each segment. So like where's dispersed camping allowed, you'll just be able to filter, you know, highlight all sections of trail where dispersed camping is allowed, or all sections of trail closed to bikes or closed to horses, that type of thing. And then I hope at, you know, to also include, going back to the data-driven pages slide, if you remember those purplish pink outlines, I hope to also kind of include a very subtle version of those on the online map, so you can see where all of the PDF maps are and link directly to those from the online map. So as I said, this does get a lot of use. We're kind of off the charts with ESRI. I kind of always tell a story about a phone call I got from their developers. You know, they're a huge international company, and they called us to say, hey, how can we help you? You know, you're showing up in our monthly reports. Your product is getting so much use. So that was pretty cool. I'm not sure if that's just like a few volunteers and staff spending 12 hours a day on it, which probably happens with us from time to time. But yeah, everyone's using it, and it's cool because we can put all the information we have out there for everybody. Do you have any questions in particular to the online map?
It looks like, Matt, we have one that they're asking how you see the dispersed camping. I can't see it online on the online maps.
Yeah, if you just click right now you just have to click a section of trail and it'll say camping, like closed, seasonal, dispersed, designated, that type of thing. So on the new version, you'll just be able to hit like a filter button and it'll just highlight all those sections for you.
It looks like we have another one about will conserved lands be added to the online map?
Yeah, we do record information associated with that. I'm not sure how much we would, for the trail user version of the online map, we would focus on things like camping and, for example, we go through some Michigan State University property north of Kalamazoo, and they just had some changes to basically the hours of the land. It closes in the evenings, so we communicate that type of stuff. Yeah, so we just, from the trail user perspective, our only plans right now are just to communicate like use related information.
Yeah, I think we share, we share public and private and, you know, who the landowner is, but that's kind of as much detail as the average trail user might.
Yeah, not knowing who's asking the question. If you're a trail user, that would be my answer. If you're a trail volunteer that's trying to explore and plan the North Country Trail, then we would have some different resources maybe that we could help you with. Think we're good with the online map? Cool. Yeah, it's a great tool. We don't pay very much money for it. It's worth every penny that we pay, and it makes life for everyone from our Park Service superintendent to a person who's getting out on the trail for the first time. It helps everyone. So I love it. So we have some time left, and I just put together a couple slides on kind of what we do with this stuff. So over the years, we've shifted from higher end, what I call survey grade GPS units, which are very cumbersome and very expensive, not only to buy the hardware, but then to license the software to use them. We've more and more shifted away from that to just using iPhones, iPads, and you can use Android devices as well. And then we have started to use, so I guess we've been using it for quite a while now, this this Bluetooth GPS receiver, which is maybe slightly more precise than the GPS receiver built into an iPhone or an older Garmin. It's still never going to hit it. It doesn't achieve the same level of accuracy that a survey grade unit would, but we're kind of constantly checking the results, and especially having the data available back to our users, both on the online map and the highly detailed PDF maps. So I think it's doing a pretty good job for us. So as we kind of touched on, Avenza Maps does have some data recording capabilities. You can record GPS lines and waypoints with that. You can take photographs that will have a a geographic point associated with them. It's very useful for us to be able to put like an aerial image with like some landowner boundaries, and then go out in the field with a group of people and all look at where we're at. And a lot of our regional trail coordinators are trying to lay out trails, so having like property boundaries or wetlands that they can both record the GPS line and reference that custom map that we've made is really important. So that's where I think Avenza Maps is a good GPS scene software. So not as good as like for just a trail hiker, but pretty good for like a trail mapper who's trying to like plan trail based on some layers that we've built into a custom map that they're using in Avenza. But historically, like I've mentioned, that GPS kit or Gaia GPS, I use that. Our regional trail coordinators don't use that as much, but that's something that I would generally use when I go out. And then Kenny can maybe talk to this a bit if there's any questions, but I don't think that, with the quality that you get on some of these mobile devices, these smartphones that are available, I would not necessarily recommend that a trail volunteer run out and buy, one of these Bluetooth receivers. I think you can do a pretty decent job with just your mobile device. So.
Yeah, I would second that. A lot of times when I am using the bad elf in certain situations, I'll just turn on my phone just to kind of compare, and it's really similar, because the bad elf, you're going to be off feet anyways. It'll tell you right on the device itself, but it's really not that much different than a cell phone.
Yeah, and a lot of times I think the iPhones are getting augmented with further precise location information based on cell towers, as well as like the GPS satellites. So yeah, it's worked pretty good for us. I wouldn't have imagined this would ever be the case 10 years ago. And another tool that I think is really underutilized, and it's kind of a new piece of software, but it's been around for a few years now, is Onyx Maps. They have done their best to take nationwide, make a nationwide compilation of all the land ownership parcels in every state. And the app does come with a fee. It's pretty nominal. It's in, I think, that $30 range is their entry point for like one state, maybe like $60 or $70 for the entire nation. But this is really cool. It's a smartphone app. It's focused on providing like the hunting and fishing community with information on access to hunting and fishing locations, but it's used by real estate agents and all kinds of folks. It's extremely useful. Anybody who needs to know land ownership and to be able to see your location in relation to land ownership, and then you can load a topographical map behind it, or as you see here, a satellite image. It's just extremely useful for trail planning. So I would encourage those of you who are volunteers for the North Country Trail Association, who are doing trail planning and exploration, to check this out. I believe they have a free trial. I do have an email from one of their developers just wanting to chat with us. I know they're trying to get more into the hiking community, so I always ask all these developers when they contact us if there's any subscription code we can give out to our volunteers and stuff like that. So I'll always be advocating for that and sharing that if we can. But yeah, I think we've given away a few free subscriptions to Onyx at some different workshops and stuff. I like it. It's useful. I use it all the time, both on my desktop. You can pull it up in your web browser, as well as on my smartphone. It is. You got to keep in mind they are doing this for the whole nation, though. So I think it's been like a frustration at times for Kenny and others because it has like 4-year-old information in it, like for the state of Michigan. So that doesn't help him much when he's trying to make landowner contacts. But you know, it has property lines, so that's something. So that is about all I had with, I guess, accounting for my technical problem there. We're probably right at about an hour, I guess. Does anyone have any questions on anything?
Now we just got a question about the famous gut hook.
Yeah, right. I think there'll probably be a North Country Trail gut hook app at some point. We just have to figure out how and when. But yeah, that's, I'm not sure that it really, I know that you have to do a little bit more, maybe, you know, pulling different things together. But yeah, I think, I don't think that it would do anything for us that we don't have right now exactly. So that's maybe why we're not scrambling to make it happen. But yeah, I think we'll move more and more in that direction, is my suspicion.
I think we have almost, oh, I think we're getting some more questions in.
Okay.
I had someone who asked, have you all used ARC Collector for field data collection?
Some of us have, yeah, that, that'll be a direction we'll explore as well. Yeah, that's the same company that makes our ArcGIS online map makes a number of really nice, like, mobile device app templates that can be used for different things. And maybe that's not the best way to describe Arc Collector, but it's a mobile app that is made by the same company to allow the input of information into our system. And I've only tested it, and it's pretty cool to think that you can go out and update things in real time. So yeah, it holds a lot of potential for us, and I think both Valerie and Kenny have used it. I think the Ice Age Trail uses it a lot too, or I don't know a lot, but I think they're using it.
Matt, we've had a couple questions, and I haven't been able to click over to the web while we've been doing this, but a couple questions about Ohio maps and people not being able to see data or maps for Ohio. And I'm guessing that's just because of Buckeye Trail.
Well, yeah, the NORDA maps are still, they're the one section that's like, we haven't figured out exactly if we're doing that or if that might be something that the group down there does. So that'll happen relatively soon. We'll get that squared away. I think I think I may have noticed we had, you know, like some issues with the Avenza updates. And I think the former Great Trail Sandy Beaver, now Wampum Chapter section in Eastern Ohio is stuck in the Avenza system still. So, but those should be available. I won't bother clicking over right now, but if the PDF should be available to download from our website, and if they're not, I'll remedy that real quickly. Same for the data.
That might have been what the question was about.
Okay. Yeah, there was an issue with Avenza. I noticed they were like not set for sale when I was in the back end of the Avenza store. So I will get with the developers on that. I will send them an email right after this. Looking good. All right. Well, I'll let Abby close it out. But I, thank everyone for joining us. Like I said, feel free to hit me up with any, hiking related map questions or volunteer if you're a volunteer as well. If you're a volunteer and you're in the Michigan, and Kenny's region in Michigan, you can hit him up with questions on best way to do things. He spent a lot of time out in the field, both for us and, before he worked with us for the Forest Service. So he's got a ton of experience doing stuff out there. Everything is kind of centrally located on that sort of long URL, but I think, if you hit the North Country Trail homepage, you'll find the maps page pretty easily. I was thinking about this earlier, we really do, all of us take your comments real seriously. When you won't believe how serious we take them, I think. When someone sends something in, we generally all talk about it and see if that's something we can adjust or do better. So we're always glad to hear from you what's working well, what's not working well, what are some new opportunities that we might want to explore technology-wise. So we appreciate all of that. And the North Country Trail has just grown in popularity. I've been here since 2004, and our biggest problem back then is no one knew who we were, and now it's that is not a problem. So we're getting tons of use, and we want to just make sure that the tools we're putting out there are supporting that in the best way they can. So feel free to continue to support the work by going to northcountrytrail.org. You can make a donation at any time. Always glad to have that. That makes things possible.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Matt and Kenny and Val, for all helping put this presentation together. And thank you to everyone who stuck through us through some technical difficulties. And thank you for being part of our 2020 virtual celebration. We still have 3 more events to round out. We have 2 more next week. And then in September, we'll having one with the National Park Service. So make sure to look at that at the NCTA Celebration website. All the registration information is there. We love that you guys are being with us, even though we're still in distance. So we appreciate all your support, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our next virtual events. And hopefully soon we can see each other in person as well. But thank you again. And thank you again, Matt, Kenny, and Val, for doing this.
Thanks a lot. Bye.